Life is a journey, not a destination. Ralph Waldo Emerson. The elites are planning on updating the system. Help yourself by staying aware and let the world know what is coming. Please share these videos. On October 9th, 2020, the Bank of Canada, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, the Riksbank, the Swiss National Bank, the Bank of England, and the Board of Governors at the Federal Reserve and the Bank for International Settlements published a report for CBDC key requirements.
In particular, if a major country would launch a CBDC. And that's mentioned in the report, and that's another area for international cooperation. And in that area, I very much believe that the IMF should play an important role, given its broader membership and given its grasp on the macro financial dimensions of CBDC. So that's another discussion, and the IMF will be part of it.
Benoit is talking about if a major country creates a CBDC, there is a spillover risk, meaning that the rest of the world will use their CBDC for international transactions. He says that's a separate topic and one that the G20 is working on. He thinks the IMF should be the organization that oversees it. Do the IMF connections make sense now? On October 7th, 2020, Christine Lagarde publishes this video on the ECB's YouTube channel.
A potential introduction of a digital euro as a complement to cash, not a substitute, could also allow a public source of outside money to remain at the core of European payment systems. But it could also potentially challenge the role of banks in our financial ecosystem and potentially crowd out private payment solutions. So we are carefully exploring the benefits, risks, and operational challenges of introducing a digital currency. But this is high on the agenda.
The ECB is moving forward with their CBDC. They need to make a system that the innovators can work off of versus the central banks ruling all aspects of the platform. Now the ECB has 19 member nations that are all going to create a CBDC. As Benoit mentioned, there are spillover effects and risks. The international G20 cross-border aspect needs to happen before the nations move forward with their domestic CBDCs. Right now, a crypto asset could be utilized because the payment platforms have been updated. On October 6, 2020, Chris Larsen was interviewed on the LA Blockchain Summit.
What's Ripple's relationships right now with the Bank of England or other central banks or the Fed?
So we spent a lot of time over the years in very productive dialogue. Central banks have been actually terrific. It's so funny when I think this whole cryptocurrency thing began, everybody said, well, the central banks are going to be your worst enemies. In fact, I think they've been among the most constructive sort of financial regulators out there, maybe because they're dominated by economists, right?
The central banks have been on board all along. They knew the trajectory of the debt bubble and are eager to weasel their way out of it. We are waiting for the politicians to max out their credit cards before they start the reset. They can only push it so far until they hit a wall, and we are inches away from that wall.
We need to promote and embed a financial architecture that is fit for the challenges of tomorrow and that helps accelerate the transition towards a more digital and more green euro area economy. It is a challenge. It would be easy to revert back to our turf, behind our borders, and to assume that life will continue as it was. We cannot let a good crisis go to waste. We have to use it to be stronger the day after. Thank you.
Governments have been recklessly spending for the last 30 years. Now a virus comes along and it's the perfect scapegoat. They can blame the virus for taking down the financial system. On December 20th, 2019, Augustin Karsten was interviewed at the Singapore FinTech Festival.
We are very respectful of each jurisdiction. Each one faces their own problems. Certainly, we are very supportive of the efforts of the PBOC. As a matter of fact, we're also learning a lot of what they are learning as they develop this. But each country has a different reality, and therefore each one needs to go at its own time And again, I mean, there are countries, as we see here, we see many countries where the use of cash, for example, is falling very, very rapidly, but there are other countries where the use of cash is increasing. So, I mean, it's very difficult to generalize. What we need to do as central banks is to be ready. So, if we're ready technologically speaking, we're ready from a logistical point of view, we're ready from a regulatory point of view, that's what we need. And therefore, if the need is there to move faster on CBDC, we will be able to do so.
The software has been updated. The central banks are ready. It's all ready when the governments agree and shake hands. When it finally happens, it's going to happen fast.
Indeed, as the pandemic broke out in Europe, banks acted as a crucial backstop to our economy, thanks to both their historically high capital buffers and, of course, our emergency monetary policy measures too.
CBDCs are going to be a new monetary tool. The COVID crisis came and debt exploded, the most spending we have ever seen in history without a war. There is a solution to all of this, and it's coming. There will be panic, and they will present it.
The thing is that, as John just said, none of the participating central banks has actually decided to do a CBDC, and it's for them to decide together with their governments, parliaments, constituencies, public opinions, and that's not something that can be decided at a global level, nor can it be decided by the BIS. But it is a significant turning point that these 7 central banks have decided to join forces and to reach a common approach.
The governments are working together on a fair platform, while on the domestic level, they're working on CBDCs that will exploit their citizens. At first, CBDCs are going to look to benefit all of humanity. But as a crisis happens and things come up, the CBDCs will be conditioned. CBDCs will be used as currency, and they will be an instrument for balance. Your savings will dwindle away as governments need to cash to fund their operations.
But the path of recovery from the current crisis remains long and uncertain. Countries across the globe, including in the euro area, are seeing a resurgence of COVID-19 infections. In the current environment, the demands on finance will be multifaceted. The pandemic will test the adaptability and flexibility of our financial system. It will accelerate structural trends towards digitalization and a carbon-neutral economy, reshaping our societies in fundamental ways.
Lagarde is a powerful woman. She's telling you what's going to happen. The COVID crisis is going to reshape society in a fundamental way. We are updating. This is a major update. We are going from Windows 95 to Windows 10.
We think there's a place for both the central bank digital currencies and the decentralized digital currencies. They're different things, right? The beauty of the decentralized digital currencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, for example, is they move value with just pure economics, right? They're policy free. They don't bring the political elements along with the value. Whereas a central bank digital currency, and I'm not criticizing this, it's just saying this is just an absolute truth. It moves value and policy and politics along the way. So it becomes very difficult to kind of integrate 2 CBDCs together with not just the economics, which is simple and policy free, but it's the political elements that become kind of more challenging.
The world doesn't need a reserve currency. With the crypto asset paradigm shift, do you remember when Ripple headquarters welcomed the People's Bank of China? XRP is not backed by any government. It's code. It's fair. CBDCs will need a bridge asset.
No, it's not. We really don't see this conversation as a competition among central banks. China is blazing the trail, and it's among the few central banks which have actually moved to the pilot phase when it comes to CBDC, and that's the so-called DCEP project. That's, as I understand, primarily a domestic project. And other central banks also are entering in this pilot phase. And that initiative exactly makes the point that we need a cooperative approach to CBDC.
As governments move to CBDC, the need for a bridge asset becomes apparent. If this is the plan, they will need to utilize crypto assets before all of the nations move to CBDCs. Crypto needs to be liquid enough for the central banks to utilize them. I believe macro crypto is on the verge of taking off because they're going to use it. And it needs to happen before they implement CBDCs everywhere.
New technologies emerge that can change how financial and payment services are offered. Now, while these trends create challenges, they also present great opportunities. They have the potential to quicken the pace of recovery, spur productivity, and advance society's economic well-being.
Crypto and technology is going to breathe life into the global economy. It's going to make a more efficient economy. There's a lot of benefits for the governments to move to this paradigm shift. As you are witnessing with these clips, that's exactly what is happening.
There is a major initiative in the G20 to improve cross-border payments. That's coming to G20 ministers and governors next week. And part of that work plan, it's a work plan that the CPMI, which I chair, is very heavily engaged in, and the BIS is engaged in as well, is exploring how new technologies could help cross-border payments. One of the key building blocks is around how CBDC could help cross-border payments. And I think the IMF is heavily involved in that work. And looking at these questions of international spillovers, I think will be taken forward in that context.
If all nations update to CBDC, there is no need to have the US dollar as a reserve currency. They are working on a platform for cross-border payments. The G20 is working with the IMF on this initiative.
Banks. Further digitalization and consolidation, both domestically and across borders, will strengthen the banking sector, reduce excess capacity, and foster a common banking market within the euro area, with the scale that goes with it.
With interest rates low, the banks aren't doing as well as they normally do. This technology update opens the door for banks to profit in other ways by enabling all banks the ability to offer services that the Tier 1 banks offer.
But you also have to look into the external channel of monetary policy transmission, that is international spillovers, which we've mentioned already. And that's a global discussion to have, and that's for the G20 and the IMF to have that discussion. And you possibly also have to look into the impact on the transmission of fiscal policy, not only monetary policy. There is a view that CBDC could help governments implement transfers to citizens in a more efficient way, and thereby possibly improving the efficiency of fiscal support, and also possibly helping support financial inclusion and fight inequalities. So it's a much broader discussion, and that obviously goes way beyond the scope of this particular report and would involve a broader range.
Updating the global economy is a big deal. We see the writing on the wall and we parked our money in the right assets before the system turns on. Crypto is a long-term hodl, but in the end, society is moving to the superior technology. What lies behind you and what lies in front of you pales in comparison to what lies inside of you. Ralph Waldo Emerson. If you believe that the system can be saved with crypto assets, I Trust Capital is a platform that will allow you to open IRAs in crypto and gold. IRAs have some tax advantages. If you're interested, there is a link in the description of my video. If you enjoy my content, please consider joining my Patreon.